Welcome to Dealing with Foreground Obstructions Part 2. In this section we're going to look at the workflow between Mocha and Final Cut. Okay, so I've opened up our Mocha project inside Mocha for Final Cut. You can actually open this up in Mocha Full as well, but for the time being, since we're going to be working with Final Cut, I thought I might as well show you it inside Mocha for Final Cut. We're going to export the screen and the finger that we've rotoscoped so it will go over the top inside Final Cut. Okay, so with our phone layer selected, let's export the tracking data. We've got two options here. We've got Final Cut Basic Motion, which will only export the translation, rotation, and scale data of the layer. In this case, we don't want that for the screen. What we want to choose is Final Cut Distort. This will actually distort the image that we'll insert into Final Cut to the 4 points inside the surface of this phone layer. So let's just go ahead and save that. Let's call it phone, and let's save. We're also going to export the finger mat layer. This finger mat is going to go over the top of the layers inside Final Cut, and so we need to export its shape data. This will export out to the shape data plugin inside Final Cut. And let's call that finger mat. And then we can move over to Final Cut Pro. Okay, so I've started a project here inside Final Cut. We've got obviously our footage layer, which is put into a sequence, and I've also imported a screen layer that we're going to insert onto the phone. So the first thing we want to do is import the XML of the phone layer. We can keep all settings as they are. Then we want to stick the screen down onto our sequence. Right now, obviously, it's going to play at full screen. It is very important that you make sure that when you distort data onto your surface, that the frame size is actually the same as your footage size. Once we've got this into the sequence, we can just come up to our Mocha Distort that we've imported, copy it, select our layer down in the sequence, and paste attributes. And now for this we specifically want to pick distortion. And bang, there we go, it's on the phone. It's like magic. Obviously now we've got the little issue of the finger going under the phone. That's where we want to bring in our lovely shape data. So we'll bring that in. Oops, that's the phone data. We want the finger mat. Again, settings can stay the way they are. So we've got our Mocha shape data here, and we can just drag that straight down onto the sequence. We're going to want to have to clip the footage back just to the end so we can clear out this matte data where it's not needed. In a very similar to way as what we've had it here, where we finished the layer at this point, we can crop it up to this point just to get rid of any extraneous data. So let's just quickly render that. And there you go. One rotoscoped finger on top of a very nicely distorted screen. Let's try and add a little bit more realism now by adding a reflection to this surface and a little bit of indentation to make it look like it's inset into the screen. If I turn off the screen for a second, you can see we don't actually have any reflection data to use to comp back into the shot. So we're pretty much going to have to do what all good visual effects artists do and fake it. So I'm going to copy in a new copy of the footage layer back to scratch, and then I'm going to go to Nest Items, call this reflect. Now let's go into this. What I'll do is scale this up to full as it can go. In Final Cut it's 1000. Now we can play around with this a little bit. I'm going to maybe adjust the center over here a little bit just to find an interesting point. That's probably about right. I'm then going to add a blur. So we'll ramp that up fairly high just so all the detail is lost. Let's just bring this back up to 100% so you can see it a bit better. Now we don't want any of this colour in here really, so I'm also going to add a colour corrector and just pull down the saturation to 0. So this gives us sort of a basic fake reflection that we can now use to composite over the top of the screen. So let's come back to our original sequence. Just going to turn back on our screen layer. Then what we want to do is copy our distort data again and paste the attributes down onto our reflection. Again, choosing distort. And there we have a nice lovely grey reflection layer. We can then go ahead and go to our composite mode and choose screen. Now it's a bit light at this stage, so we can also add in some opacity, but what I'm also going to do now is copy this whole layer and paste it in to a new layer. I'm then going to go back up to Effects and choose Matte, Soft Edges, and in our soft edges I'm going to probably reduce this down to about 3. I think it's, yeah, about that. 3 is a good edge, just enough to look like the inset's in there. You can tweak this as much as you like to get it looking right. I'm also going to invert that and turn on Gaussian. Then I'm going to set it to multiply rather than screen. Let's just render that. So you can see now we've got a light reflection and an indentation in the screen. I'm just going to go back to our screened layer and just reduce the opacity down a little bit. Let's just quickly render that again. And so that adds a subtle reflection. So here's the final result. I've just quickly gone in and changed a couple of the settings. I've moved that center point around from the scaled up reflection layer just to find a more interesting area in the footage, and just tweaked the blur a little bit so we got a little bit more detail in. So let's just quickly recap what we did today. We brought in our footage layer, we added a screen layer, we then added the distort phone data and copied it into the screen via paste attributes. We then added our finger mat layer from the shape data inside Mocha for Final Cut. And then we added 2 reflection passes to add slightly more realism to the original shot. Look out for part 3 of this tutorial, where I'll be dealing with the workflow for this shot inside After Effects. This has been Martin Brennand for Imagineer Systems.